Most gardeners spend every spring replanting the same tied vegetables their grandparents grew, never realizing that for thousands of years, the people who actually fed civilizations did the exact opposite. They planted once and harvested for 20, 30, sometimes 50 years. And the strangest part, almost every one of those crops still exists. They're sitting in forgotten corners of forests, on coastal cliffs, in old monastery beds, and along the edges of abandoned homesteads, waiting for someone to remember what they're for. 10 of them are native to North America or naturalized here for centuries, and not one of them is in the seed aisle at your local hardware store. There's a reason for that. Stay with me because by the end of this video, you'll understand why a system built on annual seeds has every incentive to keep these plants out of your garden, and how planting just a few of them turns your backyard into something no supply chain can take away. These 10 vegetables share 3 things in common. They survive winter underground or in a permanent crown. They produce food without being replanted. And every single one of them fed entire populations long before modern agriculture existed. We're going to count them down from 10 to 1, and I'll tell you exactly what they are, where they came from, and how to grow them. But pay attention to number 4, because it was the single plant credited with keeping the Pilgrims alive through their first New England winter, and almost no one grows it today. Number 10, sorrel. This lemon-flavored perennial green has been growing in European and American gardens for over 1,000 years. Medieval cooks used it the way modern kitchens use lemon juice, dropping handfuls into fish sauces, soups, and spring tonics. The reason sorrel disappeared isn't taste. It's shelf life. Sorrel wilts within hours of being picked, which makes it impossible to ship and impossible to sell in a grocery store. So it vanished from supermarkets and, with it, from public memory. But in your garden, sorrel is one of the easiest plants alive. Plant a single crown in well-drained soil in early spring. It emerges before almost any other green, often pushing through frost, and you can harvest leaves continuously from March through October for the next 5 to 7 years. Hardy to zone 3, one plant feeds a household. Number 9, walking onion. This is one of the strangest plants you will ever put in your garden. And once you see it work, you'll wonder why it isn't in every yard in the country. The walking onion, sometimes called the Egyptian walking onion, doesn't make seeds at the top of its stalk. It makes tiny bulbs. Those bulbs grow heavier and heavier until the stalk bends over, touches the soil, and plants itself. Then a new clump grows from that spot. The plant literally walks across your garden, one season at a time. You eat the green tops like scallions, the underground bulbs like shallots, and the top sets like pearl onions. Plant a single cluster in fall, and within 3 years, you will have a self-spreading onion patch that needs nothing from you ever again. Zone 3 through 9. It outlives almost everything else in the bed. Number 8, rhubarb. Everyone has heard of rhubarb, but almost no one understands what it actually is. Rhubarb is a perennial vegetable, so tough it survives temperatures down to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. There are recorded plantings in Siberia. There are clumps in old Vermont farmhouses that have been producing stalks every spring for over 100 years. One plant, a century of food. The catch, and this part matters, is that you only eat the stalks. The leaves contain oxalic acid in concentrations that can make you genuinely sick. So you harvest by gripping the stalk near the base, twisting and pulling, never cutting, because a clean cut invites rot. Take about half the stalks each season and leave the rest to feed the crown. Done that way, a rhubarb plant will outlive you. Zones 3 through 8. If you're tracking, you've already heard about 3 plants that, between them, could give you greens onions, and dessert stalks for the next 40 years from one planting session. But we're just getting started, because the next 7 are even more forgotten. And the one at number 4 is the reason an entire colony survived its first New England winter. Number 7. Asparagus. This is the most familiar perennial vegetable on the list, and also the most misunderstood. People plant asparagus, harvest it for 2 or 3 years, and pull it up because they think it's done. But asparagus, given the right bed, will produce spears every spring for 20 to 25 years. The Romans were cultivating it as early as 200 BC. They built ice runs in the Alps just to keep spears frozen for the festival of Epicurus. Charlemagne included it by name in his famous Capitulare de Villis in the year 800, a document that listed every plant his royal estates were required to grow. Plant the crowns in deep, sandy, well-drained soil, 14 inches apart, and resist harvesting for the first 2 years. Starting in year 3, you'll get spears for the next quarter century from the same bed. Number 6. Skirret. You have almost certainly never heard of this one, and that is exactly the point. Skirret is a perennial root vegetable that fed medieval Europe for centuries. The roots are sweet, white, finger-thick, and grow in clusters from a single crown. Monastery cooks roasted them, boiled them, and pressed them into a kind of natural sweetener, long before sugar was available. Emperor Tiberius reportedly demanded skirret as tribute from the conquered territories along the Rhine. And then sugar came, and the potato came, and skirret was forgotten within 2 generations. It still grows, it still produces. It's hardy in zones 5 through 9, and lasts 10 years or more in the same spot. The taste is somewhere between a parsnip and a carrot, but sweeter than either. Number 5. Good King Henry. The name alone tells you how old this plant is. It was named after a 13th century French king, and medieval Europeans planted it directly outside their kitchen doors so they could harvest greens without leaving the house in winter. Good King Henry produces 3 different foods from one plant. Tender shoots in spring, eaten like asparagus, leaves all summer, eaten like spinach, and seeds in fall that can be ground or sprouted. One planting feeds a household for 20 years, and the plant is hardy down to zone 3. Spinach, the modern annual we replant every season, is a pale shadow of what Good King Henry offered for 1,000 years before the seed catalog buried it. Stop and think about what you've just heard. 5 plants in, combined lifespan from one planting, over 120 years of food, combined annual work, almost 0. Before I tell you about the plant that kept the Pilgrims alive through their first winter, I need to point you somewhere. Because the question I get more than any other is not about which plant to start with. It is this: where do I find all of this in one place? The vegetables, the seed sources, the planting depths, the harvest timing, the soil prep, every method I've covered across this channel for a backyard you already own. I put it together. It is called the Self-Sufficient Backyard Blueprint. The link is in the description, but stay here. Because what indigenous peoples did with the next plant kept an entire colony alive when the European seeds in their pockets failed completely. And almost no one in modern America grows it. Number 4. Groundnut, the Apios americana. This is the plant that indigenous peoples across eastern North America cultivated for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. And it is the plant historians credit with feeding the Pilgrims through the brutal winter of 1621. Without groundnut, Plymouth colony likely dies. The plant is a 6-foot nitrogen-fixing vine that produces strings of underground tubers, each tuber loaded with 3 times the protein of a potato. 3 times. It grows in partial shade. It improves the soil it sits in. It is hardy to zone 3. and almost no one in modern America grows it. The reason is simple. It takes 2 to 3 years to produce a serious harvest, which makes it useless to industrial agriculture, but absolutely perfect for a backyard. Plant tubers in spring near sturdy support. Wait. Then harvest in the fall of year 2, and every fall after that, forever. Number 3. Ramps, Allium trichocum. Wild leeks. These are native to the deciduous forests of eastern North America, and they are the Appalachian families, have foraged every single spring for at least 4 centuries. The flavor is somewhere between garlic and sweet onion, intense enough that a single handful can flavor a stew for 10 people. The catch is patience. Ramps planted from bulb take 3 to 4 years to establish a colony, and from seed, even longer. But once established, a ramp patch returns every spring for decades with zero input. You plant them in moist shade under deciduous trees, the exact spot most gardens leave empty. Hardy in zones 3 through 7. They are one of the few wild foods so prized that high-end restaurants pay foragers $30 a pound during the short April harvest. You can grow your own. Number 2. Sea kale. Crambe maritima. This is the perennial vegetable that British coastal gardeners have been growing for over 300 years, and the plant Thomas Jefferson recorded planting at Monticello. Sea kale is a relative of cabbage and broccoli that lives along the coastlines of northern Europe, where its waxy blue-green leaves survive salt spray and Atlantic wind. You harvest the blanched young shoots in spring, which taste somewhere between asparagus and broccoli, and the plant produces for 10 years or more from a single crown. It tolerates sandy soil that almost nothing else will grow in, and it's hardy through zone 4. One plant. A decade of harvest. And it is so rare in modern American gardens that most seed catalogs don't carry the seed at all. Which brings us to number 1, sunchoke. Helianthus tuberosus. The Jerusalem artichoke. The most aggressive, most productive, most stubbornly immortal vegetable. Native to North America. Indigenous peoples cultivated sunchokes from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast for at least 1,000 years before European contact. The plant is a sunflower. It grows 8 to 10 feet tall, produces yellow blooms in late summer, and stores its energy in knobby underground tubers that taste like a cross between a water chestnut and a potato. But here is what makes sunchoke the king of this list. It stores its carbohydrates not as starch, but as inulin, a prebiotic fiber that feeds your gut bacteria and barely raises blood sugar. It is one of the most nutritionally important vegetables ever grown in North America. And once you plant it, you cannot get rid of it. Leave one tuber the size of a marble in the soil, and the patch returns the following year. People have inherited sunchoke patches from grandparents and great-grandparents on land that hasn't been gardened in 50 years. Plant in spring, harvest in fall, leave some in the ground, and you have a permanent food source that will outlast every annual crop in your garden, every supply chain disruption, and possibly the house itself. Hardy from Zone 3 to Zone 9, which is most of North America. One planting, a lifetime. So now you've heard all 10. Sorrel, walking onion, rhubarb, asparagus, skirret, good King Henry, groundnut, ramps, sea kale, sunchoke. 10 perennial vegetables, every one of them tested across centuries, every one of them capable of feeding your household for decades from a single planting. Together, they cover greens, onions, roots, shoots, and starches. Together, they replace almost the entire vegetable aisle of a modern grocery store. And together, they require less work in a year than a single bed of tomatoes. Here's the part that should sit with you. None of these plants are rare. None of them are difficult. The seeds, crowns, and tubules are still available if you know where to look. from native plant nurseries, heirloom catalogs, and small farmers who never let the knowledge die. The reason most people have never heard of them is not because they failed. It's because they succeeded too well. A plant that feeds you for 30 years from a single $7 crown is a plant that cannot be sold to you again. That is the entire reason these vegetables disappeared from the public conversation. And that is the entire reason bringing them back is something more than gardening. It's a quiet reclamation. Plant a sunchoke, plant a groundnut, plant good King Henry by your kitchen door the way medieval families did. For 1,000 years before you. Do that, and you join a chain of growers that stretches back further than any seed company has existed. If this video reminded you that real food sovereignty was never lost, only buried, hit subscribe for more stories like this one. The harvest begins now.